My name is recording in progress. My name is Alejandro Arrieta with Community Language Cooperative. And as always, I want to thank Chinook Fund for implementing language justice as much as possible. It is a full spectrum. And today we're going to practice simultaneous interpretation into Spanish. So that means that whenever Spanish is spoken, I'll be going into English as well. So if your preferred language is English, after these instructions, you will see a globe icon appear on the bottom right-hand side of your screen. Not quite yet, but you'll see it afterwards, and you'll be able to click on that, select English, and then hit mute original audio right below that so that you only listen to the language of your preference. Y hola a todos, no estoy seguro si lo necesitamos en español aún, pero para practicar la justicia del lenguaje vamos a tener interpretación simultánea al español. Si prefieren el español podrán seleccionar el icono de globo o mundo en la parte inferior a mano derecha de su pantalla después de las instrucciones. Podrán seleccionar el español y poner el audio original en mudo. If there are no questions about that, we'll let Judith turn on that interpretation feature and give you all a few seconds to select your language. I'll go ahead and test audio and ask for a thumbs up, and then we'll be good to go.
Great, thank you so much, Alejandro. So I am gonna turn on our interpretation. So from this point forward, you again should select the language that you prefer.
Alrighty, and this is the interpreter testing audio on the English channel. Can you give me a thumbs up if you can hear me? Perfect, thank you very much.
Great. Well, again, thank you so much, Alejandro, for bringing all your talents to the space. And so a reminder for all of us in the space is, as simultaneous interpretation is happening, to remind ourselves to speak at a good pace. I think especially Spanish, it's a longer language to translate. So it's a big reminder for myself as well to speak a little slower. So I am going to now share our slideshow. We will start off with just introductions of ourselves here. And so I will hand it over, sorry, y'all, to Trina, if you could introduce yourself as I set up our presentation.
Sure. Thanks, Judith. Hi, everyone. My name is Trina Moya. I use she, her pronouns, and I'm the Finance and Operations Manager here at Chinook Fund, and really glad to see you all here. Thanks for joining us.
Great. And my name is Judith Marquez. I am the grants manager for Chinook Fund. I have a background in community organizing and really excited to be a Chinook and supporting a lot of the important work to get funding and support all the great work that's happening in the community. And my role really is to support applicants as they're seeking to apply to Chinook, and also I work with grantees around reporting and just around this whole process. So again, throughout this process, as you're looking to apply to Chinook, please reach out to me for any support. Great. So are you all able to see the slide right now? The presentation? Okay, great. Awesome. Awesome. So some of our goals for today are to get a little bit of history of Chinook if you don't know Chinook in the community yet. Also to explain what our funding mechanism is around like resource mobilizers, really how we do community-led grant making, which is very powerful, and also our grant making process, as well as the grant making criteria. So these again are the core criteria that are getting project cohort, the folks that make the decisions on who is funded, what they look at applications, an explanation of what we do and we do not fund, our priority area around community organizing, and other priority areas that we have decided to support in the last couple of years, as well as just sharing a little bit about our grantees from the past and present, so folks have a kind of orientation of folks that we have supported in the past and currently, and as well as the grant application logistics. The only way to apply as Chinook is through our online application portal. And then we will also discuss some of the details about at the application. There's going to be forms that need to be uploaded, and we just want to make sure that you all have that information. And then also just sharing our contact info. Trina and I, will be support for you all as you look into this process. Great. And so right now we want to try something a little different. We know that there are like several folks in the room, but we still want to take this time. I'm going to stop sharing, and we want folks to, if they can just share their name, their pronouns, and the organization that they're here with. We kind of want to create a little bit of community space before we get started. So I'm going to pass it to Linda, if you can, because you're on the right of my screen, so I'll just choose you.
It might help if I unmute. I'm Linda Newell. My pronouns are she, her. I live on the land of the Arapaho and Cheyenne and have dedicated my life to the rest of my life now to correcting and restoring whatever relationships that we can with the land and also with those peoples. And as far as organization goes, I'm actually here on behalf of my LLC, which we're interacting with a couple of different nonprofits. And so so that's why I'm here today, to find out the process.
Great, thank you. And if you can just select someone, that would be
Oh,
great.
you bet. Let's see. Caitlin.
Thanks, Linda. Hi, everyone. My name is Caitlin Matthews. I'm here representing Food Justice Northwest Aurora. I'm a steering committee of this new organization, and we're really excited to be working on food justice and food sovereignty work through a variety of different strategies in Northwest Aurora. And my pronouns are she, her, and ella. I would like to pass it to Rick from Street Fraternity.
Hi, everyone. My name is Rick. I work for an organization called Street Fraternity. We're right on the corner of Colfax and Yosemite, which is the most violent corner in Colorado. And what we do is we basically offer refuge to the young men in that area. So we have a gym, we have a recording studio, a computer lab, a dining room, all that jazz. So yeah, thank you for having me. It's he, him, and that's who I am. And I will pass it on to Mateo.
Perfect. Hi, everybody. My name is Mateo. Pronouns are he, him. And today I'm here representing the organization Umasimecha de CU Boulder. So we're an independent student organization up at CU Boulder. Have been there for about 50 years now, and really just focus on organizing, amongst students and communities, in particular within the Latinx, Chicanx, and Indigenous communities. So yeah, really excited to be here.
And if you'd like to select someone.
Perfect. All right, I will select Erin.
Oh, Erin, you're on mute.
Yeah, sorry. I'm a grant writer for one-to-one mentoring and Telluride, and I'm having some problems with my video, so I'll probably turn my camera off after I'm done. My pronouns are she and her. And again, like everyone else, I'm excited to be here. Thank you. And I'll pass it over to Trina, who is next to me on my screen.
Some of you have already heard my introduction, but I'm Trina with Chinook Fund. I'm the Finance and Operations Manager, and I use she, her pronouns. I will pass it off to you, Jory.
Hey, my name is Jory McCann. I am the director of Montezuma Youth Alliance. I use she, they pronouns, and the mission of Montezuma Youth Alliance is mentoring youth through community service, art, and nature. And we are in Montezuma County, mostly in Mancos, Colorado right now, which is pretty much as far as you can get from Denver. It's like the very corner under Mesa Verde. So we're in the, I think it's the third poorest county in the state. And we're working to increase literacy and decrease suicide with youth in our area. Oh, and I'll pass to, who hasn't gone yet? Barclay?
Thanks, Jory. Hi, everyone. Barclay Jones. I'm the program manager that works with Trina and Judith and the rest of our team, and excited to be here with you all this afternoon. I'll pass to Tariana.
Good afternoon. Buenas tardes. Tariana Navas Nieves. My pronouns are she, her, ella, and I'm here from Denver Arts and Venues, the city, and I'm a fan of the Chinook Foundation and always looking to look at potential partnerships and ways to connect and learn. I'll pass it to, and apologize, Linnea. Did I pronounce your name correctly?
Yeah, no, that was it. Thank you.
Okay.
Hi, my name's Linnea. My pronouns are she, her. I am representing Nutrex. We are in Denver and we increase access to the outdoors for underserved communities, transitional housing facilities, Title I schools, kind of by providing like consistent and regular outdoor education for groups rather than like a one-off trip over the summer type of a thing. So yeah, same as everyone else. We really believe in value in building community. So I appreciate everyone introducing themselves and looking to grow. And I will pass it to Spencer.
Hi, everyone. My name is Spencer. I am the programs manager for Sustain Ed Farms here in Denver. My pronouns are he, him. And yeah, happy to be here. I will pass it to who has not gone yet. Bianca.
Hola, buenas tardes. Mi nombre es Bianca.
Hello, good afternoon. My name is Bianca Gardier, and I represent the organization Amigos de Mexico, and we are established in Aurora, Colorado, and we work with the immigrant Hispanic community, and we bring forward any resources that they may be lacking to make sure that they have a better quality of life. We focus on 4 specific areas, which are education, health, culture, and the economy. Thank you very much for giving us this opportunity. It's our first time in this space, and we hope to learn a lot from you all.
Thank you, Bianca. Maybe Maura, if you'd like to go next. Oh, we can't hear Maura. I'm not sure if the...
Sorry,
okay.
I'm in my car.
There we go. We can hear you now.
Different office. My name is Maura. Can you hear me? Okay, great. My name is Maura. I'm a promotora for Voces Unidas, and we advocate for women impacted by sexual assault and domestic violence. And I'm just very interested to hear about your organization and learning more about what you offer for the community. Very glad to be here.
Yeah, thank you so much, Maura. Awesome. I think John, if you'd like to go next.
And here.
Yes.
I'm gonna mute myself real quick so I can see what is going on. But I will like to have I believe Alejandro or Alejandra.
Oh, I see. Oh, thank you. Thank you, Maura. Hopefully you selected a language in Spanish for interpretation. Not sure if that might be the issue. Yeah, and then I'll just have John go next. And yeah, and then we can, after John, we can have Alejandro introduce himself again. So go ahead, John.
Good afternoon, John McMurtry, Lake County Community Fund here in Leadville. We're at 10,152 feet. So love to have you all come join us sometime. And we have a wonderful community, very diverse. We have recent citizens that have arrived to Leadville. About 70–75% of our workforce works outside Lake County and services the hospitality and tourism industry in Eagle and Summit County. We're working on one specific program, is a series of education seminars on nonprofit organizations and what they mean and what the system in America, why it's here, why we have nonprofits and their role in our society and as a social safety net. And my pronouns are he, him. Thank you for inviting me to join you this afternoon.
Thank you, John. Alejandra, if you'd like to introduce yourself one last time.
Of course. My name is Alejandro. I will be your simultaneous interpreter, as always, to implement language justice as much as possible. I'm here if we need any additional support. Thank you.
Great, thank you all. So I'm going to head now into our slide deck. I did put it in the chat. And Trina, if you could help me to repost it again for folks that might have not received it. And also just a note that I will be looking off to maybe a different side, not directly in front of me, because I have two monitors. So just bear with me if I'm not facing forward. So we'll pass it then now to Trina to actually give us a little bit of background of the work that Chinook has done here in Colorado.
Thanks, Judith. So Chinook Fund is actually celebrating our 35th anniversary this year. We've been around since 1987, and we were started by a group of young people of wealth who wanted to change the power dynamics in philanthropy. So they created a foundation that was inspired by the Funding Exchange based in New York that would be accountable to the communities it serves and supports grassroots organizations working to create positive social change. So we are really proud to have funded many of Colorado's leading progressive organizations in their early stages, such as 9 to 5 Colorado, Padres Unidos, Land Rights Council, and Compañeros, just to name a few. We initially launched a community-led grant-making committee, which evolved into our current giving project model, and I'll be telling you a little bit more about that later on. Next slide, Judith, please. So we are part of a growing network of funds across the US that are using the Giving Project model. I think currently there's 11 funds. And each one may operate a little bit differently, but the core model of the Giving Project is the same. And again, I'll talk a little bit more about the Giving Project in a minute. Next slide, Judith. Thank you. Here's Chinook Fund's mission to support grassroots organizations that are creating systemic change towards social, economic, and racial justice. We make grants to groups that are often overlooked by mainstream funders, particularly in communities of color. And the next slide, thanks. And these are our core values. So liberation, we believe we all have a role to play in collective liberation, and we cultivate practices that bring people together across our differences. Community, recognizing our interdependence, we are committed to building caring, respectful relationships with one another. Integrity, we understand the power and responsibilities that come with being a steward of financial resources. So we're honest, accessible, and transparent in our work and accountable to our constituents. And finally, leadership. We encourage learning and innovative thinking and support the development of grassroots leaders through our willingness to take strategic risks towards our vision of abundantly resourced movements. Next slide. So what is the Giving Project? Essentially, it's how we raise and move funds to our grantees. So twice a year, every Giving Project cohort consists of 20 to 25 people from diverse backgrounds and experiences who will become donor organizers moving money to social justice organizations. So over a period of 6 months, the group explores issues of race and class on a personal and community level, learns how to be effective fundraisers within their own communities, and to make grant decisions based on Chinook Fund's criteria using a democratic process. So instead of a program officer or a team of Chinook Fund staff making the decisions, it's a different group of individuals deciding who will receive grants each cycle, guided by our program staff who serve as facilitators. And Barkley, who's with us today, is one of those fabulous facilitators. So the cohort members are also the ones that raise the funds that will be awarded. So there's not a predetermined amount that is set to be dispersed each cycle. The group sets its own goals and is expected to award the grants based on their combined fundraising totals. So you may just want to keep that in mind when you are determining what level of grant you want to apply for. Giving Project is a skills building opportunity where you can develop fundraising and grant making skills. So if after today's workshop, you're not sure if your organization is a good fit for Chinook Fund's criteria, we invite you to participate in a Giving Project cohort yourself to learn more. So with this slide, the graphic on the right is just a little outdated because I think we have a total of 13 sessions instead of 9, but the basic process is still the same. So after those initial educational sessions, the group begins to fundraise and review the applications that we've received. They discuss the applications together as a group to determine which seem to be most in alignment with our criteria. And then virtual site visits are scheduled with those organizations that they think might meet or seem to meet the criteria. Although having been a Giving Project cohort member myself, it's not always exactly clear from the application. And so the site visits give us an opportunity to get, ask some clarifying questions, but also gives the organization, the applicants, to tell us more about your work and answer some of those questions. Then after all of the site visits are completed, reports are submitted and reviewed by the cohort members, and they then use a consensus-based model to make the final grant award decisions. And we'll provide more info on when these steps happen later in the workshop, so you have an idea of the time frame. Next slide, please, Judith. So this is just a quote from one of our grantees that we wanted to share as we shift into our grant making criteria. Our motto is change, not charity, because we are funding organizations who are working towards systemic social change that will create impacts beyond the immediate communities that they're working with. We appreciate that our model and our criteria are helping grassroots organizations to be strategic in creating this type of change. So I'm just going to pause before. Oh, sorry. Do we want to do any questions now, Judith, or wait until the end?
Yeah, I think that we can keep going a little bit and then we'll open it up to questions.
Okay, great.
All right. Well, thank you again, Trina, for giving again this great overview of the Giving Project specifically. So now we're going to get into some of the funding guidelines. And so this is really what these Giving Project cohort volunteers use. These are the tools that they use to evaluate the applications that come in. And so these 3 core criteria, we talk about them a lot at Chinook. It's really what the cohort members are trained around. And so the first one is around constituency-led. And so at Chinook, we define constituency-led as work that is led by the most impacted by the injustice. So again, we want to see organizations that have leadership that comes from the impacted community. That could include, if you are you working with youth, how is that youth, involved in that decision making, and are part of the solutions. And we'll get into it a lot more. Also around community organizing, we really see this through a lens of intersectionality. As you all know, we all have different identities, and we want to make sure that those nuanced and complex ways of experiencing the world, and sometimes how we experience oppression, that they are part of that conversation, right? That we don't simplify an issue or folks, because it might not capture the whole solution, right? We might not capture what really is all going on. And I think one example that I want to give is, and I'll give it later actually, once we get into more community-wide in depth. The next one is lasting effect. And so again, we're looking for work that has meaningful change in the community as a whole and for future generations. And so again, there's different ways of addressing oppression in our community. That could be through, direct services, education and empowerment and advocacy. But one thing that we're looking for is really around like lasting effect work that is in the community. Some successful applicants have these criteria. So they're based in communities facing injustice or oppression. They have democratic leadership and decision making that is led and accountable to those directly impacted. Your work is engaging in dismantling privilege and oppression within the organization and in the community, and demonstrate work that is leading to permanent change in the community. Also, applicants, we prioritize folks who are working in alliances and collaborations. We know that in this world, we can't fight these big systems alone. We are looking for work that's strategic with long-term visions, have seen progress in their work. And we also understand that a lot of our grantees are actually startups. So, you might not have, 10 years or 20 years of, doing work in the community. And we understand that, but definitely, so that one, again, it's a little more wiggle room for folks that are just starting off. You see yourself as part of a larger movement for social justice in the state and in the country. Work that shifts paradigms and offers alternatives to the existing institutions and systems. And again, that's one thing around Change Not Charity, and just kind of like this lasting effect of really trying to see how does your work address that systemic issues, right? How do we see systemic change through the efforts that folks are doing? Also, Chinook, as Trina was saying, has been known to support work that could be potentially considered controversial or coming from marginalized or new emerging tactics. And one example that I'll share is back in the 80s, Chinook was one of the first community foundations to support AIDS advocacy. And, back in the 80s, that was a very, just kind of ostracized and marginalized when folks would maybe contract AIDS, and especially a lot of lack of support and discrimination against queer and Black communities. So again, Chinook was kind of in the forefront of supporting those movements. And that also has to do with sometimes foundations that are more traditional don't want to support that kind of work. Also, folks that are intentionally evaluating the work to see, is this moving us forward, or what do we need to change? What we don't fund are strictly organizations that provide direct services to individuals. And again, we're going to get into this more of why Chinook has this lens. And, it is a necessity in our community, but we'll get into why we don't do that. We don't actually just, fund direct service only organizations. So we do not fund groups that are above a 350 budget cap. And right now, that is kind of historically, we support a lot of, emerging or growing organizations. But also, if you already check this question out and you're like, oh no, our budget is above, we, encourage you to spread the word about Chinook if, you don't qualify today, for folks that might be in that budget line to share that information. We don't fund organizations that are led by one individual or it's controlled by one individual. And again, that really comes from that constituency led, how are you building power collectively in the community? We do not fund scholarship requests. And so that could be, again, it could be educational, what have you, but if it is very traditional, if the funds that are being requested really to just support a scholarship, then we do not fund that. Chinook does not fund profit-making organizations except for worker-owned co-ops. And if that's your situation, you can reach out to me around if you have a worker co-op and you have any questions around that. Chinook does not fund other foundations or pass-through funding. Also, Chinook does not fund organizations who work or have a decision-making body based outside of Colorado, with the exception of, or possible exception of, regional Indigenous groups. And for this section, again, specifically for Indigenous groups, there could be exceptions since Indigenous groups might have a regional territory that is not that is beyond the lines of the Colorado state borders, and really to honor again that this land is Indigenous. We don't fund kind of C4 work, attempts to influence elected office or to support someone that is running for office. And also we don't fund direct union organizing, although we support it. That is not something that we fund. So I will stop right there. If there's any questions, also feel free to add questions in the chat, and so we can answer them as they go. And so I think I see one here from Jory is, does pass-through funding include organizations under fiscal sponsor or umbrella and using an EI number of that fiscal sponsor? That's a really great question, Jory. No, actually, fiscal sponsorships are okay. We accept those applications. Folks are eligible if they have a fiscal sponsor. And we'll get into that as well of the 501c3 statuses of folks. You could be a 501c3 on your own, or you can have a fiscal sponsor. We will require a memorandum of agreement just as a copy for us for our records. But thank you for that question. Any other questions? Okay, great. So we have John, do you fund community foundations? Yes, so that's a good question. Again, if it is really traditionally a community foundation where you are allocating, grants to other organizations, Chinook does not fund that. And so, I think it would be a question of like, if that community organization has a program, and it meets these criteria, then yes. But if it is really traditional community foundation, Chinook does not fund community foundations. Great. So we have another one. It's what are some more examples of indirect service to an individual? Great. That's a great question. We'll get into that. We're going to get into like a lot more slides around that. And then from Tariana, does a cohort raise 100% of the funds to be distributed? What is the average raise? Oh, that's a great question. Trina, would you like to take that?
I knew you were going to ask me. I don't know that I have. Barclay, you might have more of a historical perspective on this, and sorry to call on you.
All good. Yeah, I'll type in the chat for Tariana so that Judah can keep going, but happy to answer any other questions. We retain 15%, but I'll type that in the chat so folks can see it.
Thank you, Barclay.
I do want to just say that yes, the cohort does raise all of the funds to be distributed. And what Barclay was referring to is Chinook Fund retains a 15% administrative fee to help cover some of our costs of the program. But I don't know, hopefully he has a sense of what the average raised has been over the years. I'm not even going to take an attempt, but I can take a look. Oh, thank you.
160.
Barclay.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Great. Okay, great. So we're going to take one more question and then keep going forward. Do each of your recipients have a place in the cohort? So actually, those are two separate processes. So right now with this grant application workshop, really it's organizations that are looking, for funding and are going to submit their grant application. And so the Giving Project, it's separate. Again, there are 25 folks from the community. And actually, that's a really great question because, sometimes there could be conflict of interest. Like, for example, if there's a Giving Project volunteer that sits at the Giving Project table decision making, and let's say that they're part of a board or they're part of an organization that is applying, so they have to actually name that conflict of interest, and they will not be part of that decision making because, of course, that would be conflict of interest. And so that's a good point that we really try to watch out for. Like, for example, if you as an organization are interested in both of maybe applying or also being part of the Giving Project, we would ask you to choose like what cycle you will do that. Like in this cycle in the fall, I will apply for the funding. And then in the spring, I will apply for the Giving Project as a volunteer because we don't want there to be really that conflict of interest. So we would ask you to not be active at the same time with either, if that makes sense. And I can connect you to Barkley if you are interested in the Giving Project after the meeting. Okay, great. So we will continue on to the core criteria. So for constituency led, these are some of the questions that you might be asked during a site visit if you are selected. And it's again really to uncover, you know, how do you see constituency led in your work? So again, I want to cover this. It's we really believe that the work should be led by those most impacted. Some questions that folks might ask is, how does the organization demonstrate their work that is driven by people affected? Does your leadership reflect the folks most impacted of the oppression? And do they help, you know, shape the strategies and, you know, the terms of their own liberation? And so, as I was mentioning, for youth organizing, if you work with youth, we would ask, you know, how do you incorporate youth voices in your decision making? Is there an advisory board? You know, are they part of other decision making bodies? To ensure, again, that there is that, you know, leadership development, that there's building power within communities, and really, again, these strategies that really resonate and will impact the communities for generations to come. So the next one is around community-wide, as I mentioned, really seeing this lens through intersectionality. And so we ask, for example, how does organization work to a change, you know, work towards change that will affect all members of your constituency that are exploited, oppressed, or marginalized, taking into account those multiple facets of their oppression. So, you know, our organization's building multiracial, multi-class, multi-gendered movements, and also around intersectionality versus diversity. The way that I really see intersectionality is, you know, it's more than just having people at the table that are diverse. It's really around, you know, how do these folks that have multiple marginalized identities really have power in the organization and in the decision making. And that example that I was going to mention was around intersectionality, was around through the Black Lives Matter movement. The disability justice community really highlighted that about 50% of people killed by the police in police brutality cases are actually disabled. And so that's a really important intersectionality, right, around how Black community that are disabled are facing, you know, a disproportionate, you know, impact by the police. And also that Black racial justice and Black Lives Matter is an issue of community, of diversity, disability justice organizing. So it's really beautiful to see when, you know, different movements really come together and really recognize each other's struggle, you know, that is interdependent, and, you know, that we can reach liberation together. Lasting effect, looking for work that's upstream, systemic, and strategic towards change. So questions that we will ask are, will the proposed work help build concrete and lasting political power to address the underlying causes of the problem? And how does the organization define the root cause of the issue they're working to change? Great. So I'm going to just cover this one before we get into community organizing. So those three that we just covered are the core criteria. And so from there, we actually have priority areas. And one priority area is around rural organizing. We really try to watch out and really try to recruit folks from rural communities, because we know that a lot of the resources are centered in the Denver metro area or in the Front Range, and resources perhaps are not going to our rural communities. And also there's some inherent difficulties in rural communities. I know I was talking to someone that they were explaining that, I think it's like southeastern Colorado, maybe the folks from Montezuma can speak to this, of how you know, they're organizing in different cities and it takes like an hour to reach like the next city, and you know, that's a challenge, transportation and really organizing as a region. Another priority area is community organizing, and Chinook defines community organizing as the process of bringing affected people together to use their collective power to win improvements in their community and change the power structures to advance social justice. And I think, again, a really key thing to point out around community organizing is around building collective power. There is an emphasis in community organizing around, again, we have very traditional power structures, right, that have caused a lot of oppression in our community. And so we're wondering, how does your group, how does the work that you're doing really build power, change power dynamics, within your organization, within your community, and within the power structures that be. So 2 other areas around that are priorities for Chinook are around Black liberation and Indigenous sovereignty. And so, again, so many foundations and so much work was influenced by the, second uprising of the Black Lives Matter movement. And so the Getting Project nationally, as Trina was describing, actually made it a priority to center, these 2 issue areas or just kind of movements. And so for Chinook, we really prioritize and are trying to center our work internally and externally around Black liberation, Indigenous sovereignty. And so again, those are just some examples of campaigns or issues that folks in those movements may apply for. But, of course, each, organization obviously determines on how that looks like for them. But we definitely have an eye towards supporting in Black Lib and Indigenous sovereignty movements. Great. So I think I'll stop there and take a couple more questions. Trina, did you track any by chance?
I don't think there was one that I sent another link to the slides, but I don't think there's any others in the chat. Anybody has any?
Judith, can you repeat what was the percentage of people that are arrested that are disabled?
Yes. Yeah, and so, I could share that information. There is no national and comprehensive study around, the impacts to, people that face police brutality and have disability conditions, but it's 50%, and it doesn't specify race. 50, yeah. And and so, and there's also other impacts around, like, actually 1 in 4 African-American person is disabled in our country, and that is due to, systemic racism and, just the conditions of divestment of communities of color and what have you. So, it is a big issue around how disability and racial justice are intertwined. So thank you, Tatiana. Great. So we'll continue on in really getting into why Chinook Fund prioritizes community organizing. And I know Barclay has, shared this information. I learned it from Barclay, but of how, on the national landscape for foundations, the biggest area that is funded is actually to religious groups. It's over $100 million. It's just a lot of money is concentrated there. Also, it's a lot of money is concentrated in more like human services or even education. And so actually a very small just a smaller portion of those funds, either through direct giving or through foundation work, goes to structural change organizations through or community organizing organization. And so that's why Chinook historically has prioritized community organizing, because it's so unsupported. And there's other research too that as well is that when an organization is led by people of color, they're even more under-resourced. So those are just kind of a little bit of why Chinook centers around community organizing. And another reason why is that, as we mentioned a lot around systemic change work, these systems don't want to be challenged, right? If an organization is challenging and trying to push for changes, sometimes even to its foundations, so folks might resist that. And so that's why it's not supported. It all makes sense. So an example of a community organizing organization that we funded actually just last cycle was Denver Justice Project. They may actually address police brutality in Denver and in the state. Great. So like I mentioned, and actually that reminds me, I need to pause. I am kind of going a little fast in my speaking rate. So great. So now we will get into kind of really breaking down of like how we see these kind of four sectors. And so first of all, we just want to recognize that, there's different ways of addressing oppression. They're all very needed. But again, for the reasons that we described, we prioritize that community organizing. And so I will share the definitions of these four, and then we can have questions about that. So we define services as supplying basic services to people who need them, often to meet basic needs such as food, healthcare, shelter, and transportation. And actually before, I skipped a section. So before I move on, what I wanted to mention around this too is that organizations actually, many organizations actually do all four of these, or they might do a combination of like one or two or three, and so we recognize that organizations actually are doing, many things at the same time. And so again, we just want to have a conversation and just see if, how is your work, has some components of community organizing. And as we know, like there's startup organizations that maybe they're like, okay, we want to get there, we want to start doing more of this power building. But these are the stepping stones that we're still going through. Okay, so here we go. So services, I'll repeat again, is supplying basic services to people who need them, often to meet basic needs such as food, healthcare, shelter, transportation. And an example of this is a fictional organization. It's a women's health alternative. So what this organization does is that they provide birth control, free pregnancy tests, and abortions. They actually help women and folks that need abortions, regardless of gender. They can maybe help them with travel costs, with gas, with a hotel stipend for them to access that service. So what's important in this example is how this organization is meeting a very important need for a specific individual, right? And you can see like all the different direct services that is being provided. But it's not like, addressing why that woman has to go to maybe another state, as we're seeing right now in our country with, the overturning of Roe versus Wade. And so again, it's not getting to like, why do women have to, have free pregnancy tests? Like what's wrong with our healthcare system that doesn't allow for this to happen, allow this to happen. The next one is around empowerment. So our definition is providing programs that focus on supporting positive identity development and self-esteem among marginalized groups. An example is Healthy You, Healthy Us. It's a youth program run by the health department, and it really provides a 12-week comprehensive sex ed class. They talk about contraception options, sexuality, healthy communication. They work with middle and high school students, and they have mentors who are graduates from the program, as well as that they have an after school program that provides service projects in the community. And with this one, again, as you can tell with like empowerment, they're providing a workshop around, comprehensive sex ed. And it's really about like, building up those young folks around these really important, tools that they need around sex ed. Education and advocacy. So we define this by raising the visibility of a cause and advocating for or against policies on behalf of the group affected by the problem, to lawmakers, to decision makers, the media, and other stakeholders. An example is all fictitious organizations, but it's the Act for Reproductive Rights. So this is a state affiliate of a national org. They fight anti-abortion laws and lobby to secure pro-choice policies in the state. They have a policy report, an advocacy app where they can keep up with legislation that's going on in the state capitol. They also, but they do not have people from the local community with intersecting identities in the leadership positions of the organization. And as you can tell, again, they're doing great work, important work, but then again, they're not working in the communities to really get that perspective of the community impact. The next one is community organizing framework. So again, we define this as the process of bringing affected people together to build collective power, to win improvements, and to change the power structure to advance social justice. And an example is Powerful Families. And this is a women-led org for reproductive justice across the state. So they're working on much more than abortion rights. They are talking about access to abortions in rural areas, access to contraceptions, the right to have children, the ability to parent with dignity, childcare, housing. They are conducting listening sessions and also have created a community report. And now they're partnering with other groups around the state to lobby at the state capitol for abortion access for people who do not qualify for Medicaid. That's undocumented immigrants or people who are legal permanent residents under 5 years. So as you can tell, this organization has a very intersectional lens at seeing reproductive rights. You know, you would ask, how does housing, have to do with reproductive rights? So, well, it's like you have no secure housing, right? If you're being evicted or if, you're working in, or if you're living under really unhealthy conditions, like how can you raise healthy children, right? Or how can you have a healthy pregnancy? And also they're working with, communities that are, intersecting in their marginalization, right? In their oppressions, like undocumented communities. And actually, oh, thank you, Tariana. I really appreciate you joining us. I just saw that message. But anyhow, with this example, I just wanted to mention that we have a state organization in Colorado called Color. It's the Latina Reproductive Rights Organization. And they recently won something similar to this example. They won contraception access for undocumented immigrants that they could access at the state level because they're barred from accessing it through the federal funding. So it's really great to see that we have had some progress in here. But again, hopefully you could see how this organization is building power from those marginalized communities, going to the powers that be to push for change. Great. Are there any questions at the moment?
I haven't seen any in the chat, Judith.
Thank
Sorry,
you.
it sounds like your mouth is getting dry.
Yeah, it's just
in there.
Yeah, I think it might be, I don't know, my AC or something playing with my throat. All right, sounds good. So just to continue, this is around some components of community organizing. It may include, well, actually not it may include, but it does include like having a grassroots space of support. So again, really seeing how, folks are embedded and are part of the community. Their constituencies are those communities that are impacted. Having a strategic direction for driven by their base. Clear demands on systemic change. That could look, very differently. It's like if you're working to address, a landlord that's, exploiting all of your apartment complex, so anyhow, and with the power map, that's kind of what I was getting out of, like, who is the person in power that can make that change, or they have to influence. Like I was mentioning, is it your HOA, body of decision makers? Is it the governor? What have you? Like, who really is the folk that maybe sometimes is in the way to, getting really what your communities need, but really the folks that you really need to influence to have that change. So community organizing work may have like a leadership ladder, so you can share that, like this is how our organization, develops our leaders. Like they might start as volunteers, then they become, part of the board, and now they're actually staff or what have you, just how folks are really intentionally envisioning the leadership of folks that are impacted into the organization. Great. And so with community organizing, we have, throughout the work seen how there's different ways of doing community organizing, and one is through like cultural organizing. So cultural organizing really integrates the arts, cultures into organizing strategies. Sometimes they organize through a particular tradition, culture, identity. community place or worldview. So Chinook actually has funded Al Frente de Lucha for many years. And, you know, their cultural tradition is really around Mexican and Chicano, you know, consciousness building for youth. And they've also had, you know, different policy advocacy and organizing. So that's one example. Another example of like how community organizing can look is through healing justice. And so how we define that is healing justice is how oppressed communities holistically respond to and intervene on generational trauma and violence, and how they innovate collective practices that can impact and transform the consequences of oppression on their bodies, hearts, and minds. And so one example of that is frontline farming. You know, so you would question why Chinook, you know, provides money to a farm, but really their analysis and how they work is really aligned with the criteria. So, you know, frontline farming is really racial justice. They acknowledge, you know, the soil and land of indigenous people, the, you know, labor of, you know, enslaved folks from Africa, and how also how, you know, the food justice, you know, it really impacts communities of color. You know, a lot of their leadership is actually Black-led at frontline farming. And then recently now they actually helped pass an agricultural bill for farm workers. So it's an example of an organization that actually grew. You know, they kind of started with a couple of farms and now they're actually, you know, advocating and winning policies at the state level. But also I think it addresses, again, the way that, you know, with healthy foods and, you know, through these lens of social justice, how it can, you know, heal, you know, hopefully our minds and bodies as we face these, you know, oppressive systems. Great. So before we move on to the next section, we will see, is there any questions from folks? Don't be shy. And perhaps this has been an overview for folks, so I really appreciate your patience as well. Okay, great. So we'll continue moving forward and we'll get to questions again around the application. But now we'll move on to our grantees and I will pass it on to Trina.
Thanks, Judith. Take a little break. That was a long time to talk. Thank you for doing that. To get a better idea of who we do fund, we encourage you to go to our website. There's the URL there, and you know, check out some of our grantees, previous and current grantees. There are links to their websites, and really, you know, get a good sense of the type of work that they do. If you're not sure if your organization is a good fit, that's a helpful resource as well. And just also giving everyone a heads up that coming in mid-November, we haven't set the exact date yet, but we will have our Meet the Changemakers panel, which is usually like 4 of our grantees talking about the impactful work that they are doing. And it's really attended a couple of them, and they're just very inspirational, motivational, and powerful discussions. So really encourage you to attend that, and we will be sending the invite to everybody that attended. Next slide, Judith. And this lists some of the focus areas of our current and former grantees, and so you can see it's a wide range of areas, and so it's, even though like Judith has listed out our specific criteria, there are a lot of different methods and focus areas for creating strategies. That's what I'm looking for, strategies for creating that systemic change. Next slide, Judith. So in the earlier section, we talked about the Giving Project timeframe. So this kind of gives you the timeline from the applicant side of things. So as you're all probably aware, the application deadline is September 15th. The Giving Project cohort will have their screening meetings in early December. And once they decide which groups they're going to be visiting, having a virtual site visit with, everybody will get notified, and you will know then whether you're moving on in the process or not. Those site visits will happen sometime between early December and mid-January. And then the final decisions on who will be funded will happen in early February. Groups will be notified shortly after that, whether they are receiving a grant or not. And funds usually go out within 2 to 3 weeks of those decisions. I think that's it for that slide, Judith. Sorry, that was a short break for you. Are there any questions on the timeline or anything that I just covered quickly? I don't think, okay. Great, go ahead, Judith.
Great, thank you so much. So now we're going to get into the application system that we use, and from there we'll get into details of the application. So we used a company named Foundant, and it's called a Grant Lifecycle Manager. So for short, we call it the GLM. This is the sign-in page. This is how it will look, minus the demo imprint there, but this is how it will look for you to log in. You can create a new account right there, or for sure reset your password if you forgot. Just to create your account, you'll need information of your organization. Also, it's by user information. So if, for example, you're the grant writer and you're going to be the one filling out the application, definitely fill out your information. There's also a section for the executive officer in case they're not the ones directly applying. You will create your password, and then also your user ID will be your email. So just make note of if it's your work email or your personal email. Sometimes there's confusion around that. If you're not sure if you have an account for your organization, I can search it. So please reach out to me so we can avoid duplication. So it's just some more instructions around if you're a new applicant, go ahead and create a new account or reset your password if you're not sure. From there, once you create your account, there will be an eligibility quiz. And really these two important questions that are, we don't want folks to fill out the entire application and then realize they don't qualify around these areas. But again, you must be based in Colorado or be a regional indigenous group or have a budget around less than $350. From there, you can hit the blue button to apply. And we'll continue. So here, I just want to orient you a little bit to some information and icons on this dashboard. So in this square green house icon, this is a dashboard. So if you click on that icon, it will take you to an open application or an application that has been closed or anything that if you applied in the past, but you will find all the information that exists for your profile. To the left right here on this rectangular green with the arrows, what that is indicating is that these fields are collapsible. So once you hit them, the information will populate and you will see all the information that needs to be entered. On the right side, this red circle, there's a question list. So you will see a question list and then also an application packet. The question list really allows you to see all of the questions of the application in PDF format in case you want to share this with other teammates as you divvy up the application. And then the application packet is, once all of that information is entered, you can also download that as PDF as for your own records to have it at hand. There are areas that are, they have asterisks, and so that means that those questions are required to be answered. Some features do autosave, some don't. You will see the difference. There will be a save button, a blue save button, so make sure that you hit save. Yeah, and so you will be using that portal. Also, you can come back to that application if you're working on it at different sections. So go ahead and hit edit application. Like Trina mentioned, the deadline is September 15th to apply. If you need a little bit of more time, you can just reach out to me and we can work with you. Again, make sure to log off. You can find that by clicking on your name and then signing out. You will also see where you can edit your profile or organizational information. And like I mentioned, some areas do not auto-save, so make sure to use the save button. Even if you're working in the box, the system might not recognize that you're working in the box, and it might log you out. So go ahead and save. So here are the overviews of what's in the application. So there is a section around general inquiries. It talks about, it asks for your mission statement, organization, location, and also your 501c3 status, if you have a fiscal sponsor, etc. For funding questions, it will ask your grant category and where those funds will be spent, and also your budget amount. The proposal narrative, we'll get into that. There's different questions that are asked around the narrative of your organization. We would require a one-year work plan. It doesn't, again, have to be super detailed or, in any kind of format. We just really want a calendar year of, kind of your work that you're doing for that year. We're actually going to get into some review with Trina around the financial information that we ask for. We also ask for leadership information, and so that will be something that you need to type up and upload. We'll need the bios, really brief, of the board and staff, and also other members that are decision makers in your organization. And then we have a diversity chart. We'll get into that as well. And then references, we'll need 3 references, and we just want to make sure that don't put anyone that's currently on the board that works for Chinook as a reference, since it can create a little conflict of interest, since we are sometimes facilitating the discussions of who should be funded or not. So another
Judith, sorry, sure. I just want to know, there's a few questions in the chat, and I don't know if you want to pause now or you want to wait until you get through this section and then come back to questions.
Yeah, we can stop right now. It's fine.
Okay.
From Linda.
Yeah. So Linda asked, if doing a collaborative grant, can we put more than one organization in?
Yeah, I think so. It's a good question. I guess my question would be around like who will be administering the funds, and so whoever is going to be administering the funds should be the folks that apply, since if they are awarded, that award will go to them. But yeah, definitely in the narrative you can share the story of like how you're collaborating. Yeah, but I think that would kind of just be the requirement if you are the one that's monitoring the money, or if you have a coalition, definitely the coalition lead I think that we want the application from the folks that will be administering the fund, unless you have a fiscal sponsor. If you have a fiscal sponsor, we just need them, MOU, and then you'll be fine. So hopefully that answers the question. Okay, great. Then for Caitlin,
yeah. So yeah, if you're applying for general operating, how would you like us to address the one-year work plan? Should the calendar year start in February, since that's when final decisions happen?
Yeah, that's a good question. Yeah, I think that for us, we are flexible around, like, we understand, like, especially for this fall application process, it's like perhaps your calendar year is ending, right? And maybe you haven't even had a chance to do your planning for the year for 2023, right? So I think that for us, like, we're flexible if you want to just show what you have, but if you do have information and planning for the year of 2023, that's fine. We just want to see kind of, again, like, we understand that, like, as you're applying, that you're coming to year's end, but we still would like to see, those 3 months that are coming for like October, November, and December. And if you have additional planning docs for 2023, that would be great.
Hey, Judith, can I just chime in a little bit on that? So I am going to talk about in the financial section about providing your fiscal year statements. And so I just want to make sure there's not any confusion around, the work plan that Judith's talking about, and that you may be like, for Chinook Fund, we are on a July to June fiscal year. So our work plan might cover July to June. So I think we just want a current work plan. I don't know, I don't remember it having to be a calendar year, but we want to know for the period that you're going to be using the funds, what is the work plan? I think that would be the best way to line those up. And then, I wouldn't say that you need to necessarily line it up when the final decisions will happen. I think lining it up with when you're, what your fiscal year is and what you're, when you're going to be using the funds is probably the best way to approach that.
Thank you, Trina. That is actually, yes. Thank you for the clarification. That's right on. Alrighty. Thank you all. And please keep having, just keep sharing your questions. So some just additional tips on the portal here around goals. For this section, you see goal 1, you will need to click where this green arrow is on the left side under another goal, and then it will populate goal number 1. If not, you will only see goal 1 and you will only enter goal 1. So again, if you have additional goals that you want to enter, you can put it there. Like I mentioned, this program online portal has a branching functionality. So if you hit yes, watch out, sometimes something additionally populates for you to fill out. There are some files that we will upload and we will get into that. So now we're here around the narrative questions. There's 10 narrative questions that we will ask, including the 3 core criteria. And there is a character limit for each section of 2,000 characters. We want brief information. We don't want this to be super burdensome for you all either, but definitely information that really captures the work that you're doing. And, I will say that, that's sometimes a little bit challenging as folks review applications, like really trying to capture everything that's, part of this organization. So sometimes that is a challenge, and, and hard decisions have to be made around, do we think that this is aligned enough for us to do a site visit? So again, that's why it's so important for folks to really share their narrative so we can really get a grasp, at least through that section. So here are the narrative questions. I won't read them all, or I won't read them in detail, but just to highlight, besides the 3 core criteria around constituency-led, community-wide, and lasting effect, there are some that are additional, including the root causes. So, how does your organization see what is the root cause of the problem that you're addressing? Also, another question is around your decision making, really kind of describe how you make those decisions, how your organization looks. Movement building, like how do you see your organization as part of a larger movement? And, that could be the section where you talk about that collaboration that you're doing with that organization through movement building. And then we also ask around funding strategies. Again, we just want to know what other ideas you have of foundations or ways that you're raising funds. We really encourage folks to have, other plans besides Chinook. Sometimes we are like the first funders for some organizations that are maybe volunteer-led for many years, but we definitely want to support the sustainability of those organizations and to seek, funds elsewhere as well. And so also around, evaluation, how does your organizations do evaluations? So those are some of the narrative questions. Now some application terms. So as I was sharing, application category. So we have 2 ways that folks can apply. You can apply for generally operating, which we actually very much encourage. We think general operating really gives people discretion to use the funds how they see fit and where they need it the most. But sometimes organizations might decide to apply as a project support, and that category could be used when, for example, perhaps that project is more aligned in the criteria with Chinook, and would have a more likelihood of, again, of just getting funded, or like just more around like the alignment of criteria. And there could be sometimes, in my experience in organizing, we've seen coalitions that, again, maybe are being led by two organizations, but and it becomes its own entity, and then they can apply through that organization when maybe that larger organizations is outside of the budget cap, but this new project really is just starting, or just different scenarios. But again, so you can watch out for that around project support versus general operating. And if you have any questions around which one you might want to apply to, you can talk to me. Again, we will ask for your current annual budget. Trina will get into this conversation around the fiscal year. Also, the grants that Chinook offers are startup for $4,000. And so I think those are for organizations that have, their organization has only been established in the last 4 years. And then from there, any organization above 5 years would be considered established. But you can apply as established at any point, even if you're a startup. If you want to apply for established, the only situation that could occur is that if you're a startup and you apply as established, you're going to be kind of in the running with other established organizations that might be in the works for many years. They might have things more in place, etc. So we just kind of like we just want to point that out, that any organizations can apply as established, but again, you might be in the running with folks that might have been in the field a little longer. So for organization status, like I mentioned, if you have a 501c3, that's great. Also, if you're fiscally sponsored. And then also here's a sample of work plan. It doesn't have to look anything like that, but you can look at it in regards to that question of what perhaps a work plan could look like. Great. So we're going to start getting into the financial reports documents, but I don't see any questions in the chat. Any additional from our team over here? All right, well, then we'll pass it on to Trina. Oh, Trina, you've been on mute. So if you could start from the top.
Sorry, I apologize. I clicked on it, but it didn't unmute. Can you go back a slide, Judith? So I just was saying that I am covering the, what financial reports are required with your application. I'm going to start with, I'm gonna talk from a very basics point of view, knowing that some of you may be with startup organizations, new organizations, don't have like financial staff or a bookkeeper. And so I apologize if this seems very basic, but I just want to make sure it's clear to everyone. So you do have the option of filling out our one-page financial reports form. And this is a very condensed version of it here on the screen. I just wanted everybody to be able to see the various information that's included. So it's basically broken into by fiscal year. So you have the first column, your last fiscal year. If you just started this fiscal year, you can just put NA if you don't have any previous year information. The next column is for the current fiscal year. So we want to see what your budget is for this year, and then what your year-to-date actuals are. And the last column, the next fiscal year, you will only need to complete if you are planning to use the grant funds in your next fiscal year. These highlighted squares are just highlighted because people tend to forget to fill them out. And it's really important for us to understand, first of all, what your fiscal year is. Are you on a calendar year, January to December? Are you like Chinook Fund and go, work on a July to June fiscal year? et cetera. So we want to know what are your fiscal year dates. And then in the current fiscal year for the year-to-date actuals, we want to know what period that's for. So we understand, are you reporting on 1 month's activity, 6 months activity, 9 months, et cetera. So it's that's the columns across, and then the sections, the first section is your income. So we want to know by type of income. So we have like individual donations, grants, in-kind donations. Those are some examples. There's more lines in the actual form in the application, and you are welcome to, if there's not something, if you have a type of income that's not already included in the form, you can type it in. Let's say, I don't know if government grants or government funding or contracts are already included, but let's say you have that, you can type that in and use that. So you can adjust it to your organization. And then the next section is your expenses. So what, these are some very common expenses, but again, you can, include whatever is appropriate for your organization. And then sorry, lost my train of thought. And then the net income loss line will auto calculate. So the total income, the total expense, and the net income or loss line, those all auto calculate. So you don't need to enter anything in there. It will add up all of your income, add up all of your expenses, and calculate the difference in those lines. And when you are entering the information, be sure to just enter numbers. So don't enter the $sign, don't enter commas, because it will mess up the ability of the sheet to add everything up for you. And then at the very bottom of the form or of the chart is your ending bank account balances. So we want to see that as of the end of your last fiscal year, and then as of whatever your year-to-date period that you're reporting on here. So if you choose to fill out this one-page form, I think it's a very simple form to complete. But if you already have your own, financial reports and want to just attach those, that's fine. You can do that. I just wanted to see if there was anything else I wanted to point out on this. I think that's it.
Maybe we can answer this question from Linda.
Yep.
Do you fund new startups with no financial history for a project or coalition?
I believe we do have funded new startups that haven't had any financial history. We would want to see for your current fiscal year, what is your budget for this year? What is your plan for the year of how you're going to, pay for the activities that you're doing, whether you have staff or not. So we want to see what your plan is for the year and, what expenses you have incurred so far this year. I'm not sure, and I don't know if you or Barclay can answer, if somebody is applying and would we accept if they don't have a budget for the year? I mean, I think that's a minimum requirement, right?
Yeah, thank you, Trina. Yeah, so actually what we would require is that folks would minimally submit our template form, this one that Trina is just presenting. And like Trina said, your budget information. Also, just if you can maybe sit down and think, have you had any in-kind donations? I think that I worked with someone maybe a year ago that they were all volunteer-led, but they actually had a lot of in-kind donations. And so, and then there's also another section Trina will cover where we asked what other funding sources are you looking into? And so there is still information in this form that would be helpful, even though the organization might have not a full scope of financials. We still want whatever information, folks can provide.
Thanks, Judith. And let's go ahead and go to the next slide because that covers that piece. So this is at the very bottom of the form. So if you did fill out like for your budget this year, let's say you plan to get, or you are expecting to receive $50,000 in grants. So we would just want to see at the bottom, would like you to list out who those funders are that you either know you're going to get money from or are hoping you'll get money from, plan to apply to. So we've got the name of the funder, the amount that you have either been awarded or are planning to apply for, and what the status is. So, you know, it's approved, or you've submitted your application and it's pending, or, you know, you're planning to apply for that funding. Just so we have a sense of, okay, you know, you've listed $50,000 in other support. Where is that support coming from? Okay, next slide, Judith. So if you do decide to submit your own financial reports, I just want to go over what it is that we need to see. And these are just examples. There are many different formats for financial reports. It doesn't have to look exactly like this, but we do provide samples, and you're welcome to use them for your own reports if you would like. So your balance sheet lists everything that you own, which is your assets, everything that you owe, which is your liabilities, and then the difference is your net assets. So net assets is assets minus liabilities. So examples of assets are, you know, cash that you have in the bank, maybe if you've like paid a year's worth of an insurance premium, that would be considered a prepaid expense. Maybe you've purchased some computers or a printer. And so that would be listed under, you know, equipment. So it's, again, what you own. Your liabilities could be, you know, your accounts payable, just your monthly bills that you've received, but you've not yet paid out. Accrued paid time off for your staff. Just, again, some examples. So the important thing about a balance sheet is that it must balance. So your total, these boxes that are kind of highlighted in light green, your total assets should equal your total liabilities plus your net assets. So those two sections should match. And again, your net assets is just your assets minus your liabilities. Next page, Judith. The other income state, or the other financial statement that we require is your income statement. Oh, and I wanted to mention that for a balance sheet, it is as of a certain date in time. So it's usually a month end. In this example, it's September 30th, 2021. All right, you want to go back to the other slide, Judith, thanks. So on the income statement, that covers the money that you received, the money that you spent or paid out over a period of time. So the ending date on your income statement should match the date of your balance sheet. So in this example, the income statement is for the period of January 1st to September 30th. So ideally, your income statement will start with the first day of your fiscal year and end the most recent month end that you've prepared statements. And preferably, we would like to see statements that are dated within the last 2-3 months at the most. So if you submit your application on September 15th, ideally, your statements would be dated no later than June 30th. That would be ideal. So again, the income statement is your income, all of the money that you've received or that you have available, that you've received for the year or for the period. All your expenses, everything that you've paid out for the period that you're reporting on. And then, so your income minus your expenses is your net income or your net loss if your expenses are more than your income were. And that's one reason why we ask to include on our one-page form the ending bank balances, because it helps us see if you did have a net loss for the year of say 20,000, but you started the year with 75,000 in the bank. That helps us see, okay, well, they were able to cover that loss with the funds that they had available in the bank. I think that's all on the income statement. Judith, if you want to go to the next. And then the other piece that that is required is your budget. And again, there are many different forms of budgets. This is just an example, but it should provide us with an idea of what your plan is for the year. So how much income do you expect, or are you hoping or planning to receive? What do you expect to spend that on? So we want to see your total income and your total expenses for the year, what you expect to, how you expect the year to end as far as your net income and net loss. Some people do include a year-to-date actual column in their budget. And if you do have that, that would also suffice for your income statement. Yeah, I think that's okay. So I just want to, do we have a summary page, Judith, that reviews the three? I thought we had another slide in there. Sorry.
Yeah, it'll be in like 3 slides.
Okay, sorry. So just to review again, you can fill out our 1-page financial report form, or if you have your statements already prepared and just want to attach those, you are required to have your last year's balance sheet and income statement, your current year's budget, and your current year's balance sheet and income statement year to date. And I just want to point out that on the application, there's only room for 1 attachment for each of those. So each of those periods. So you would need to combine your balance sheet and your income statement for your last fiscal year into 1 file. You can do that with like 2 separate tabs in an Excel spreadsheet, or you can, combine in a PDF, in 1 PDF, or even, Word document. We're not picky about what format you give it to us in. We just want to see all of those documents for each year. So, all right, I think, is that the end of my section? Okay, thanks.
Thank you, Trina. Yeah, this is super helpful.
I think are there some questions that I can answer now? Let's see.
Or folks can also go off mute and you can ask Trina directly.
Go ahead, Linda.
Thanks. So if we don't get our act together, so to speak, by the 15th, what are the other, or are there any other cycles throughout the year?
Yes, so our next cycle will be the spring cohort, and that application will probably open in mid-December. Is that correct, Judith? Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. Mid-December, and those funding decisions will be made in late May, early June. And then, yeah, those funds will usually go out by the end of June.
And the deadline will be to apply would be mid-February.
Anybody else have a question on the financials? And I'm always happy to answer questions that might come up. We'll be providing our emails at the end of the presentation, and please feel free to reach out to me.
Great, thank you so much for your amazing resource, Trina. And also, I just kind of want to share too, like with Linda's question around like, startups not having any financial documents. I think that's also another thing that Chinook tries to do is like, that's why we're doing this workshop, and presenting this information with Trina is to really support organizations that are starting up that, again, they might be really grassroots, or they've just been doing things, in a very like just volunteer way. But that's why we want to make this accessible. So again, thank you, Trina, so much. And thank you for Linda and everyone for the great questions around just this subject. Great, so we're going to continue with just the last bit here, the diversity chart. This is how it looks. You will have to download it in the application process on the portal. Any form that you need to download and fill out, you will see it as a kind of a blue hyperlink. You can just read the instructions and you will see that. For example, like the template that Trina explained around the financial documents, that will be a blue hyperlink that you can download. This one as well, it will say diversity chart, and you can download it. And then if folks can fill it out, and you know, we ask for these categories around race, age, sexual orientation, gender, ability, class orientation. There's other identifying categories that, you know, there's space for you to share if it, you know, if it's really relevant and important to your organization. We ask this information for staff, board, and other leadership. Like I mentioned, if you have a decision-making body of like community leaders that are really important, you can also share that information. Another thing that I will note is that, you know, this might not be a practice that you have in your organization, or like really trying to see who's all, you know, in your organization. So, you know, share what is comfortable for you to share and what feels safe for you to share. And if you have any questions around this information, you can talk to me. And here's an example of how we want you to share that information. Please put numbers, don't put percentages. We actually want to see, you know, again, like 1 or 2 staff members identify this way, and not percentages. Yeah, so that's basically it. And another thing around the diversity chart is that, you know, we really want to just kind of see a little bit of the makeup of your organization, and that's why we ask more detailed questions around this. So here's the recap slide that we were just mentioning. This recap slide is really about all the forms that will need to be manually uploaded by you all, by applicants. There is an upload feature. So again, you will need to upload a like PDF file of your fiscal sponsorship agreement. It could be a PDF or a Word doc, either or, of a year work plan. Leadership bios, like I mentioned. If there's only like a couple of staff, you can add, and also add the board. So definitely add staff and board and other leadership bodies, and the diversity chart. And again, the financial documents that Trina explained, I can just briefly go through them. So we need a previous fiscal year balance sheet and income statement. And so for this number 1, you know, if you have a balance sheet and an income statement, you might need to put it in a PDF combined, because the system only allows 1 document to be uploaded per section. So you'll need to combine these and upload it. Then we'll need your current fiscal year approved budget. You can upload that individually. And then we'll need your year-to-date balance sheet and income statement, again, combined. If you have any issues around like, I can't figure that out, just work with me. I'll be happy to assist you in like uploading that information. Anything for this section, Trina?
Sorry about forgetting our order of our forms, but do we have a place where we review those optional if they're requesting project support? I feel like they're in a different order.
Yeah, no, that's a good question. So like I mentioned, the system has like the branching options. So for example, if you choose, instead of doing general support, you select project support. So what it will ask you there is for you to provide a project support budget. So just be aware of that. And so and also there's another question around like, are you going to use the funds in the next fiscal year? And if you say yes, then they'll ask you for the next year fiscal year's budget information. Great. So I think so this last slide is around I could potentially review your application if you have any questions. It could depend on the capacity, but definitely reach out to me if you have questions around any part of the application. You know, again, you can submit the application only through the portal. In the past, before we had this really helpful technology, things were done either by like, you know, physical application or PDF forms, but now we have this great system that I think helps everyone. And then also you will be notified by me personally if there's any information that is missing. So I will be reaching out to folks about that. Great. So we could stop for questions. Were there any questions that were coming up?
I don't think we have any in the chat, but if anybody has any, please take yourself off mute.
Cool. So we're getting here. We're going to close off. We just want to share that again, the deadline's on the 15th. Reach out to me if you have issues around submitting your application by then. This is our email. We can also share it in the chat. And then here is the portal link for folks. You can, if you like, you could get off of this workshop and just create your account. That would be great. So yeah, here's additional information. Here's a picture of some staff and board and some community leaders from the past, and a lot of joy in the work that is done here at Chinook. But yeah, let me just stop presenting and then we can just close off. Great, any questions, folks? All right. Well, again, thank you so much for joining us. We really appreciate your time. For us, again, it's really great to connect with folks in the community that are envisioning and trying to do some amazing work in the community. And again, if you don't think this is the right fit, please share about Chinook. If you see other folks in the community that are like, oh wow, like, hey, you'll fit in. Please share that information. You can also connect them with me. I'd be happy to share the information that I have. And then I'll just pass it on to you, and then maybe we can thank our interpreters. But go ahead, Trina.
That's all I was going to say was thanks to Alejandro for his interpretation. We appreciate it. And thanks everybody for attending. Please don't hesitate to reach out.
Yeah. Thank you all. Y'all have a really beautiful evening, and yeah, stay connected. Take care, everyone.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you.
Bye-bye. Thank you. Oh, gracias. Thank you, John. Have a good evening. Take care.
Excellent. Thank you for the great work you're doing.
Thank you. Appreciate it. Cool. Oh, let me stop recording. Yeah.